Good morning. Today's the third Sunday of Advent, also known as Gaudete Sunday, right? Gaudete, of course, means to rejoice, and that's the very first word of the Mass. That entrance antiphon that we do after the conclusion of the processional hymn, the little antiphon, right? You can sing along with it in your Source and Summit books. But that's the kind of words that set the tone for the Mass. So rejoice, I say it again, rejoice. And then we hear St. Paul in the second reading saying the same thing. Rejoice always. Rejoice always. So what makes us joyous? What makes us happy? For me, I was just between the Masses this morning, I was sitting on my couch with my legs kicked up with a cup of coffee, and I was sitting there with my cats, Frank and Tony. Actually, no, Frank was out in the other room. It was just Claire and Tony today. And I was sitting there, and I was happy until Father Michael came out stomping down the hall, and Tony dug his claws into me and ran away. We think of things that make us happy in life, right? Perhaps being with friends, being with loved ones. Christmas is coming up. Christmas can make us happy, right? Exchanging gifts will make us happy, perhaps. And legitimately, right? We can legitimately understand the joys of the world. Oftentimes, I'm up here talking about how bad the world is and how the world, wants to drag our souls to hell. But the good things in the world that can really, truly, actually give us joy. Again, relationships. There are things in the world that can give us joy. Baseball gives me great joy. It's okay, I know. I tell you, don't obsess with baseball and don't go play baseball every single day for 6 hours a day. But baseball can bring you joy. It can also make you angry sometimes. Being a Falcons fan really never brings anybody joy. Deacon Stephen, you're a Bucks fan, aren't you? That's not much joy there either, Tampa Bay. But so we recognize the sources of joy in our lives. What brings me joy? And it's okay for me to find joy in things, right? Here we're in the third week of this season of preparation for Christmas, but also for the second coming of Jesus Christ, right? Why did God make me? He made me to know Him, to love Him, and to serve Him in this world, and to be happy with Him in the next, right? So Jesus wants us to be joyous. He wants us to be happy. What happens when the things of this world pass away? What happens when relationships that once brought us joy break down? Or when death comes into play and that relationship is no more? What happens when the things that we once found joy in, we've aged and we're just not as good at it as we used to be? We can't quite do what we could. What happens when all the stuff that we have that brought us temporal joy here on earth, it all breaks down and goes away? We continue to look for sources of joy. And we recognize that joy is found in Jesus Christ. We recognize that joy is found in doing His will. In doing the will of God, we find joy. A lot of people look at Catholics and they're like, no, that's not true. You guys are gloomy, you're dark, you put ashes on your face, you do penance, you don't eat meat on Fridays, you do all sorts of weird things, and you're just kind of a sour, gloomy bunch of people. It's common, a lot of Catholic churches you walk into, right? And people are just scowling at you, and it's like, they're not angry at you, that's how we are sometimes. We should try to be better. I wish, that's one of the things I really love with those evangelical megachurches. They got people out in the parking lot greeting you, smiling, running out with an umbrella to lead you in. I think that's great. It's a great sense of welcome. It would probably scare most of us, though, because it's just such a foreign concept to us as Catholics. We're like, get away from me at my car. I don't... hi, how are you? It's good to see you. And when people smile at me, I'm like, ah. But we're called to be a joyous people, right? We're called to live lives of joy. A lot of times you walk into a church and you'll come in and, God forbid you sit in the wrong seat. I remember when I was a seminarian at St. Catherine's, and I went to the 7 a.m. Mass so I could make it to my 8 a.m. class at Kennesaw State. And I walked into the chapel, and I sat down in the backhand left row right on the aisle. And then if y'all were there, you remember the sacristan, Teresa, God rest her soul, but she was just a battle axe. She could, right? You were scared of her, weren't you, Deacon Stephen?
I loved her.
Father John was even scared of her, I think. She was a wonderful woman, though. But she came in and looks at me and like taps me on the shoulder and she's like, "You're in my seat, move." Goodness, okay. Moved over one, and that wasn't enough. I had to move over another one, right? Because you got to have the buffer. And so for us to be joyous, yeah, there's times when we are meant to be sad and we're meant to mourn, right? Is it the song by the Byrds that tells us that? No, it's Ecclesiastes. A time to mourn, a time to cry, a time to weep, a time to be joyous, a time to be sad. There's a season for all of these emotions, all of these feelings. But this time right now is focused on joy. What brings us joy? For a lot of people, Christmas doesn't bring joy because maybe you don't have family anymore, or just kind of reminded of lost loved ones. It can be difficult. And so you look and you're like, I don't really have anything to be joyous about, right? But in the suffering can we find joy? I find great consolation in the martyrs, whether it's the early church martyrs, who are being cooked alive on grill grates and St. Lawrence, and he says, "I'm done on this side, flip me over." Or whether it's the martyrs that were being thrown to lions and, they're singing and beautiful things. St. Maximilian Kolbe, right, a more modern martyr, died in Auschwitz. They tried to starve him to death. As he was starving, he just sang these hymns of praise and jubilation. They couldn't do it. They couldn't break his spirit. He was able to find joy even in the most dire of situations. He was able to find joy in the most difficult time. He was able to find joy in suffering. Now, that doesn't make a lot of sense, to find joy in suffering, right? To the world. In fact, that's probably why non-Catholics look at us and they're like, "Why are you guys all about suffering?" Because in embracing the cross and embracing that suffering, we are brought joy, right? In the suffering of the Holy Family on their way to Bethlehem, Mary's, 8.5 months pregnant. She's riding on a donkey, getting all shook up. I don't know what it's like to be pregnant, obviously, but that probably wasn't an enjoyable moment. And then St. Joseph gets there, and he's trying to provide for his wife. It's like, there's a barn with animals. We can go in there to have a baby. Is that okay? Who wants to do that? The cows there. Mary and Joseph are on their way in, though. We'll see if they make their way down the aisle throughout the week. You'll have to see a daily mass. But in the suffering of the kind of squalor there, great joy was found. The greatest joy known to man, the incarnation. Jesus Christ becomes man. He takes on our flesh to rescue us. What was it that we heard in the first reading from Isaiah? "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because the Lord has anointed me. He has sent me to bring glad tidings to the poor, to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and release to the prisoners, to announce a year of favor from the Lord and a day of vindication by our God." And so this prophecy is fulfilled in Jesus Christ. We are rescued from sin. We are set free from slavery. That's amazing, right? To be rescued, to be saved, to be helped out. A lot of times we find ourselves in a situation that we didn't really plan on getting ourselves into, and we're like, how do I get out of this? And for me, usually it's because I said something that I shouldn't have, and then I try to keep justifying it, and I just keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper, and then finally it's just like, you know what, I was wrong. I lied, I'm sorry. My fault. That kind of makes that suffering end for a little bit. But Jesus Christ rescues us from that which no one else can rescue us. He rescues us from a slavery so intense, so powerful, that only He has the ability to break the shackles. And through our baptism, we're claimed by Christ. We're restored to our original dignity. Original sin is forgiven us. And for that we rejoice. And so as we continue with this final week of Advent, it's a super short Advent. It's as short as it can possibly be, because the fourth Sunday of Advent is Sunday, and then that's the 24th, so the next day is Christmas. So Sunday morning Mass, and then Christmas Eve Mass on Sunday evening. Going to be lots of coffee, right? Music, and priests are going to drink all the coffee that we can. But we've got this short time in which we are called to prepare ourselves in a very profound way to experience the joy of the incarnation, to experience the joy of the Christ child becoming man, so that that Christ child may grow up to the one who embraces the cross. And we find joy in that as well. We find joy in the suffering of the cross because it unites us to him. It unites us to Christ. It breaks us free from slavery. It restores us to our baptismal dignity. And so in our lives, as we continue the last final little preparations, right? I'm sure nobody's totally ready for Christmas yet, right? No? Maybe? Got to go shopping? Got to buy Christmas? I haven't bought a gift for my mom yet. I don't know what I'm going to get her. If anybody has any good ideas for my mom, tell me after Mass, please. I gave her a Dyson vacuum cleaner one time, and she was like, the only thing that saved you is that this is a Dyson. You don't give a vacuum cleaner to a woman on Christmas. But in these final preparations of making sure everything's ready, right? The tree's up, lights are on, the stuff and the presents are wrapped and under the tree, and the food is bought, and the whatever else we got to do, right? To find joy in it. Maybe you're not having Christmas at home. Maybe you're going to travel. It's such a joy to travel at Christmas, isn't it? To drive on I-75, to get stuck behind somebody on the roller coaster who's actually going slower than they are on 75, and it's like, why are you wasting my money here? But to find joy in that. To find joy when you're at Hartsfield and you're waiting in a 4-hour security line and you got the dreaded 4 S's on your ticket, which means they got to take you back to the private room. Find joy in that. What are you talking about? There's no joy in that. Find it, right? We can find joy in all things. We can find joy in suffering. We can find joy in the fact that, hey, I'm going somewhere to be able to see loved ones. And yeah, it might be stressful. And yeah, it might be difficult. But I have joy because I know that I'm celebrating Christ becoming man, Christ taking on flesh to rescue me from death. And for that reason, I find joy in all things. I rejoice at all times. Say it again, rejoice. What does Paul say afterwards, after he says that? He says, but also pray without ceasing. Pray without ceasing. If we can pray without ceasing, then indeed we can find joy in everything. We can find joy in the cross. We can find joy in suffering. We can find joy in the crucifixion. We can find joy in martyrdom. But we have to trust. We have to pray. And we have to desire to do the will of God at all times. And so let us rejoice as we continue to prepare ourselves for the coming of Christ at Christmas. But let us continue to rejoice, for we know what he holds in store for us at the end of time.